Good evening, folks. It's 7 o'clock, and we want to stick to your schedule for this evening. My name is Joe Bietta. I'm the superintendent of schools here in Stoughton. I also reside in Stoughton, and I'm actually a graduate of Stoughton Public Schools. With me tonight are our professionals. I'll have them introduce themselves and what they're doing as part of this project. Then we'll go through the PowerPoint presentation that we have. Hopefully, you are also able to go onto the Stoughton Public Schools website and go into the building committee information that's also there as well.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Tim Bonfatti from Vertex Project Management. We're the owner's project manager on the project.
Good evening, Carl Franceschi with DRA Architects. Thanks for coming.
So the topics that are up here on the screen are what we're going to be touching base tonight. Thank you all as abutters that received the invitation, and anyone else that's here tonight for coming out. And in general, I'm going to, TJ Recupero, who's the chair of this committee, is not able to be with us tonight. So I'm going to take over a couple of these pieces of information. What you have before you is a little bit of a timeline of how we've gotten here in terms of going back to the master plan that took place in 2010, and actually started even before that, on what we were trying to accomplish as a school district. And at that time, South School literally went to the top of the list. As you also know, that list changed and Stoughton High School moved forward because, to be quite honest, a high school encompasses an entire community, and the high school in itself was in tough shape as it was. And so that became the first major project for Stoughton. And that was completed in 2019. The statement of interest was filed in 2020 by the district to the Mass School Building Authority, which is the process that you go through in order to be able to get any of the state grants that are part of bringing the costs down and make it more manageable. By 21, we had the invitation to feasibility. In other words, we were approved to come into the project process for the South. We started a feasibility study in 22, and here we are now in May, going into May for approval of the project at town meeting, and then to the voters sometime in June. So it'll be a two-step process. If it passes town meeting, then it goes to the voters. If it fails at town meeting, it's done. Once and hopefully it passes town meeting, then the entire community of registered voters have the opportunity to vote on the project. The construction would start in 25, and the school would be open for August of 27. Next slide.
So I'm going to go through the timeline that we've been through to get to where we are in the last year and a half. So as Dr. Bietta mentioned, Stoughton was invited into the feasibility process by the MSBA. That invitation allowed this town to look at both replacement of this school here, the South School, as well as a consolidation of both the South and the Wilkins School, the next oldest school in Stoughton's inventory. And that really was due to a number of reasons, including the fact that elementary schools in the MSBA now are all, much larger than what the South School was, so that invitation was extended that way. And what we did was the committee basically looked at the issue of both what kind of a school to build and where, whether it's an ad reno or new. The building committee dealt with that, and the school committee dealt with the issue of whether or not to consolidate the schools, and you'll hear more about that in the presentation. So the feasibility phase, which happened last year, was really focused on those two decisions, on what kind of a school to build and also the decision on consolidation. And you can see on the timeline that in August of 23, after a number of community forums and public meetings of the school committee, as well as obviously the building committee, the decision by the school committee to consolidate was made, and this building committee had made the decision to build a new school, whether it was going to be consolidated or not, at the location that you'll hear about tonight off of Park Street. So the fall was taken up pretty much, and the MSBA board approved that decision in October of 23. The fall we went through the design process, the schematic design process, to basically get the building designed enough that we could be accurate around the budget and the schedule and the scope, and the reimbursement with the MSBA, all of which has been finalized with them over the last couple of months, and we are now basically good to go for the board meeting that's occurring at the MSBA in two weeks, which they will now approve the project that you'll see tonight. And as Dr. Bayeda mentioned, that will be the project that is put in front of town meeting in May, and then in front of the voters in June for a debt exclusion override. And as you can see, we went through a pretty robust community communication process. We have a website that's pretty active and well maintained and has a lot of information on it about what we got here. But that's how the process took us to this point right to now.
So the South Elementary School has a number of deficiencies. These are just a few that we've put together for you. But as you know, and Mr. Dorr, who's the principal here, will tell you that the general building envelope of this building is not energy efficient at all. We know that there are leaks. Just the other day, we had an actual video of a leak happening right in the front door. Insufficient parking and event space. Administrative nursing and student rights, privacy issues where the nurses area is, the not able to meet the needs of students and staff in terms of special education and support. Accessibility to this building, as you know, is difficult. There's no kindergarten area building safety. It's the last building that we have that is down to a single vestibule entry area. And then building systems are beyond their life expectancy. And that was the decision really when the master plan came forward in 2010, that we weren't going to be spending millions upon millions of dollars on this building going forward, that in fact it would become a project. We are holding, and we welcome you to visit on the 29th of April at 6:30. We're going to have a general presentation again to town meeting reps and community folks, and we'll follow that by actually physical tour of the building so that people can see for themselves what is going on in the building. So this is basically when you're taking a look at consolidation and you're taking a look at what we want to do. We want to, first of all, really do a shout out to three of our schools that are in very good shape, both the Gibbons and the Dawes, as well as the Hanson. And what we are looking at here is what we call a heat map. Basically, where are the students? And so as you get to the darker red, that's where you have most of your population coming from within the town. So the construction concept came through with the consolidation on looking to literally go from 5 elementary schools to 4, instead of long-term consistently having to rebuild elementary buildings. So by consolidating to 4, we now are also long-term not looking at building new elementary schools. If anything, we'd be looking at renovation additions, not new. And that's because of the status of the other buildings. This also has a significant issue that has come into play just literally in the last few years, and that is the overcrowding that we have taking place in our elementary schools. Regardless of how you vote for this project, the school district is redistricting. I want to say that again. Regardless of how you vote for this project, we have to redistrict the district. In other words, families may be going to a different school, regardless of how you vote, because our crowding issues are significant. This also allows for the flexibility of potentially moving over 500 students into a consolidated school, and thereby also potentially moving, and this is a working process right now with a subcommittee of looking at what to do with this school. And we're going to talk about this before the end of the night. Dedicated classrooms in terms of kindergarten, special education, ELL, a growing population within the community. And specifically, this will be the first school at the elementary level that's been built after the IDEA, the federal special education laws, came into play. Everything else that we've had to do within special education has been to Band-Aid and create within the buildings. So this will be, except for the high school where it's state-of-the-art with support for special education, this will be the first elementary school that has that space created from the start. And then lastly, it supports the vision of our elementary schools. What do we want to do? How do we want to do it? And how do we continuously improve?
So I want to take you through the process a little bit of how we got to the design. And it is based on an educational plan, first and foremost. Before we designed anything, we had no preconceptions as to whether it would be a new school or an addition renovation. A group of administrators, principals, got together to put together a vision for how teaching and learning should happen in Stoughton. Not just at this school, but at all the elementary schools. And these are some of the highlights. And you'll see these incorporated in the proposed plan here. Particularly the notion that this will be a kindergarten through grade 5 building. And in that grade structure, there was a desire to sort of separate the younger students from the older, have sort of a lower and upper elementary school. So we want to respect that and how the building is organized. There was partly due to COVID when we learned to live with teaching happening out of doors for fresh air and all that, but also just in general, it's a great opportunity in this part of town, the way this South School is sort of a school in the woods, that we should incorporate the outdoors into the curriculum and try to integrate it with the building plan. We'll show you how we've tried to do that too. And there was also a lot of emphasis on making this new project a community project, not just a South School neighborhood, project. That it has features, it has access and resources for the entire community. So that in this one project, not only are we consolidating 2 schools, you might say, 2 populations, but also we're providing other resources to all of the other elementary schools and to the rest of the community, in fact. And then a couple other things that are more akin to modern day elementary schools. Certainly special education and not just that, but the fact of having kind of a variety of educational spaces, not just a corridor with repetitive classrooms marching down it, but that there's more variety of spaces in schools these days for the variety of activities and for the different way that students learn. Not every student is the same. And so we did look at options. As we said, we had no preconceptions, so we did look at an option of trying to renovate and expand this building. But it has a host of issues, as those of you who are familiar with it probably know, starting with the front door and where the handicap ramps aren't, these slope floors that aren't accessible, the layout of the building, the lack of those variety of spaces, and so forth. It has a number of issues. And also just trying to physically conceive of doing construction on this site while the building stayed somewhat occupied. We need to have modular classrooms. We need to have a separate, safe way for the contractors to work on this site while kids are still going to school here. It had a lot of problems, unfortunately. And we did look at 3 different options for new construction. Had a series of community meetings with the school committee as well as the building committee, and ultimately ended up on what we call the pinwheel design, just because of the way the floor plan kind of resembles a pinwheel. We'll show you a little more detail in a moment here. And we also recognize that even for new construction, construction would be difficult on this site. The land behind here where there's a playing area is fairly limited, it's sloped, it has power lines through it, and again, just getting access to it would be very disruptive. And so the Line Lumber site off of Park Street really became the preferred option for the location of the new school. For those who are familiar with it, it's just north of the existing South School. It's not quite continuous, there is some private land in between. But it's a piece of property that the town acquired, I think in the 1960s, like 50 years ago, for school purposes. And so now we're finally putting it to use. It's been kind of forested land, has some trails through it, but it's basically undeveloped land just north of what on this plan is labeled Fano Drive, an old railroad right-of-way. For those who are familiar with that, it does intersect Park Street. And the property does have frontage, both on Park Street and on Haynes Road to the north there. And we'll get into the layout in a moment, but you can basically see that the school and the related areas of development are close to Park Street, close to the southern part of the property. And that was intentional to leave some of the property undeveloped for future use, maybe by the town, maybe a little bit for the school to expand, perhaps, who knows, 20, 30 years from now. But there is a fair amount of undeveloped land too. And the access is from Park Street, where there's frontage, and the connection there at Haynes Road, which I'm sure is of interest to you as abutters, is only for emergency access, because it is prudent for safety reasons to have an emergency way in and out, but it's not going to be used on a daily basis. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Just to zoom in and to show the plan of the school. This is a little distorted to fit the screen here, but there are classroom wings which represent grade levels. It's sort of reflective of that education plan that talked about trying to break the school down into classroom neighborhoods and to separate the lower school from the upper school. So the first floor is just kindergarten and first grade classrooms, along with some common core. And then as you go up, the grades second and third and fourth and fifth stacked on top of that. And just to show there are community features to the site. There is a green field, obviously, for the kids to use as part of the school, but also for the community to use after hours, along with some paved basketball and pickleball courts too, which again could be a community asset, not just for the school. One of the advantages of the site too, that this current site lacks, for those who are familiar with it, is a very much improved vehicular circulation system. We can separate buses from cars on this site. We can have a service and fire lane around the building, which is a third drop-off point for kindergarten as well. So it's a much safer site and convenient for vehicular circulation and for queuing, so that the cars are queuing off of the street. They're not backing up onto a public road. And the configuration of the building is in response to that point we mentioned about embracing the outdoor areas close to the school. So each of these wings kind of defines an outdoor area. A dedicated kindergarten play area, older children play area, outdoor classroom, and a paved play area right off of the cafeteria and gym. And then on the right-hand side is the entry court. And we'll show you that in a moment. And again, just to explain that the access to the site is from Park Street. There's a dedicated bus loop for those students arriving by bus. There's a dedicated parent drop-off, and both of those are very close to the proposed front door. And then there's a loop around the building with a dedicated entrance for the kindergarten children too, to be separated from the older children. And then the driveway going to the north there, where that dot is, there would be a gate there. So there's no through traffic from this side, and where it intersects Haynes Road, that would be a gate as well. So there'd be pedestrian access possible and bicycle access possible, but no cars coming from the north. And just a quick recap too. This project will be very energy efficient, very environmentally friendly, and sustainable. And that not only saves the town money in terms of long-range operating costs, it also achieves additional reimbursement from the state for the initial project cost too. So it'll have things like heat pumps that are ground source. In other words, there are these wells driven down, and it takes advantage of the differential temperatures there. And so it's an all-electric, fossil-free building, very environmentally friendly, very low operating costs to heat and cool. There is this certification agency, the U.S. Green Building Council, that we will qualify at least for LEED Silver, maybe even higher, as a proof, certification that it's a very sustainable project. And just to reinforce that there'll be not only a main entrance for the students on a day-to-day basis immediately adjacent to the administration, so they can enter in a very safe, welcoming, but controlled fashion. There's also a dedicated community access point for after hours when the rest of the school can be closed off. If there's an event like this one, after hours in the cafeteria, which is straight ahead through that door, or the gymnasium, which is right here on the right, off of that access point as well. And I'll show you that in a moment too. But so in that sense, that's one of the aspects to welcome and allow the community in a very safe but controlled fashion. And the plans, again, you can see a little bit more here. The blue areas are classrooms. In these two wings of the so-called pinwheel, the administration's in the third wing, and the yellow areas are the cafeteria and gymnasium, kind of the assembly areas that are also those areas that are likely to be used by the community after hours. And the 3 floors that stack up, again, you can see the classroom wings, the cafeteria and gym administration, and then on the upper floors, it's mainly the classroom wings that continue on the 2nd and 3rd floor. And the hub of the building in the center is what's called the Learning Commons. It's kind of the modern evolution of the library. And it is a sort of multi-story space that connects all the levels. We have a quick video up. Let's see if it goes here. Go. Is it going? There it is. See if I can get that to go. No. Maybe I need an internet connection for it to go. Probably. Oh, sorry. Well, you could go on the website. It is a wonderful website with lots of great information. You can see that video. It's basically a fly around of what the proposed school looks like, and a quick tour inside too of the proposal, so you can see the spaces. There are actually other videos on the school's website too, under the project section of it, that help explain some of the other issues. Why is there consolidation? What's the process? What's the schedule? And so on. Very short videos that you can catch up on. And again, just to refresh, this is the property the town owns. Park Street is to the right. This is that old railroad right-of-way. That's the boundary to the south. That's the connection at Haynes Road. So the town does own all that property. Some of it is wetlands. We're respecting those buffers and staying away from those, except that the entrance points where we have to cross them will have very low bridges across those wetlands there. But the rest of the site, for those who have been in there, probably know it's wooded. It has some topography as well. And you can see it a little more detail. Again, the connection, this is rotated a bit, but those 2 hatched areas are those low bridges that are the connection points in the layout. And the intersection at Park Street, which obviously is the main entrance, we're still working with the state highway department or Department of Transportation, because Park Street is a state road, to determine what kind of intersection design, what kind of traffic light, what kind of crosswalks and so forth will be there to make it safe and efficient. Am I losing my mic? Any batteries? There we go. Thank you. All right. As I said, so we are working on that intersection. We don't have it definitively designed at this point, but we know the concerns, both coming and going, obviously, for cars, for pedestrians, for bicycles, all need to be addressed there and will be addressed. We do have a traffic engineer on our team, in addition to working with the town's DPW and with the state to make that a safe and efficient intersection design. And just to show it again as to how it fits on the site, if you can see that there. Again, it's a little distorted, but the green line is Park Street. This is the proposed entrance. The gate will sit here so that all the activities coming and going to Park Street, that is the road and the connection to Haynes, the frontage that the town owns there. And this part of the site remains undeveloped. You can see some of its wetlands in those areas. And I don't know if you want to talk construction, Tim? This is not in the next one.
Let's change the battery up.
It's more so for the folks at home to hear us, I think, that we have the microphone. Otherwise, we can just use our teacher voice and you'll hear it. Sounds like it's working.
Sounds good.
Hello.
There you go.
So I'm Tim Bonfatti from Vertex, and we're the owner's project manager. So I'm just going to go over a bit of the construction implications of the project, and obviously that's a lot of why many of you are here tonight, so we'll get the questions about it. I think Kyle did a very good job of laying out the access to the site and mentioned about the bridges. So the main bridge, obviously down at Park Street, which will be the main access bridge, is something that we're focused on because it is the pinch point to get to the site, both for construction purposes. That's something we're probably going to try to do earlier than, than starting the rest of the projects, just so we have construction access. By the way, the timing of this is, we're now looking, if the project is successful, this would start construction in the summer of next year. That sort of early work would start there. And I want to point out also that we have, the building committee has decided to use a construction manager at risk delivery system. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that term, so in Massachusetts you can do two kinds of construction delivery. You can do a design bid build, which means you design the project fully, bid it out to a class of contractors who bid on it. They bid just simply what's on the drawings. You don't have their input during the design, and that's one method of construction. We've, in the last 20 years, also adopted CM at risk, construction management at risk, which the high school used as a frame of reference, as well as this project would use. And that involves bringing on a construction manager early into the process. Those are a professional construction firm that will work with us as well as the community around logistics and different aspects of the construction process, including the ability to do these early packages. That tends to be a more collaborative and engaging process, and I think that we obviously, the committee, felt that it was important to do that given the location and the complexity of some of the issues around this project. So a lot of what we're going to talk about, we'll be talking to you as we flush that out with the CM. That if successful, would be sometime in the early fall. The construction manager would be brought on board. So the project is on. I just want to point out, well, you can leave it on this, Carl, but the bridge that is up at Haynes, as Carl had mentioned, is simply for emergency access, and then it will be allowed for pedestrian access from that end of the site. That would be built from, as much as we can, from inside the site. There probably will need to be some work just to tie up that bridge at the end off of Haynes Road, but our goal would be to build that from inside the site. It is essentially really a two-phase project. We have it three here because of the site work, but largely the first phase, as I mentioned, would be the bridge from Park Street to give access to the site and get over the wetlands, which we have begun the discussions with the Conservation Commission around how to do that. The second phase, the main building of the site, would occur basically over the period of about 18 months is our plan, plus or minus 18 to 20 months. And then the third phase, which will be done while we're doing the site, will be the courts and some of the landscaping and on that side there. As you can see, our plan is to put gates, Kyle mentioned that, at these locations, including up at Haynes Road, so that people don't wrongfully kind of head down to hit a gate there. But largely, we're trying to make sure that the activity of the site design is built around the school and around the school area. So it'll be gated off in that sense. These are kind of the gates that we've used on other projects. So I'll talk about the project budget. So I think as many of you are aware, we've had a lot of construction cost increases in the last few years, unfortunately. Inflation has been pretty high, just as it has been in the consumer sector. Fortunately for us as well, the MSBA has improved the reimbursement rate effectively. They did it through mathematics that they do around how they reimburse. But so that we are now able to, if successful, this would basically be in this 42% reimbursed by the state which is the same number the high school ended up being reimbursed for. So the process we went through to develop the budget and the $91.8 million construction cost was the same process we used on the high school, which largely evolves around having two estimates, and we reconcile those estimates, and we work through the course of the design to make sure we stay within those budgets. And that's another benefit of a CM at risk. We have a pretty early budget process that allows us to guarantee that number so that we don't have to come back to the state, come back to the town if bids were to come in higher. As you can see, it's a comprehensive budget. It includes administration and project management, the architects and engineers and the many consultants that work on the design process. That pre-construction is the fee. We do pay a CM for pre-construction services for the next year. We have testing and all the different utility costs that we will face. And I will point out, this does not include rebates and fairly significant seven-figure type incentives that are available from the Inflation Reduction Act to help subsidize some of the sustainable aspects of the project that Carl had mentioned. And we don't include it as a potential offset because those need to be worked through, and we although they're funded, we need a lot of work to do to make sure we know what the number will eventually be. We also have contingencies, as you can see. So the total project of $114.5 million roughly, and the maximum grant we expect would be $47.2, leaving an anticipated town share of $66.5 million. I will point out on the high school, we were fortunate to be able to come in quite a bit less than this, so the town share actually was significantly reduced from what we had anticipated when we presented it to the public. You can see on the right the impact, the tax impact that's based on the 2023 Department of Revenue statistics around Stoughton's average valuation, house valuation. And basically we have arrived at, because those numbers about what borrowing will cost haven't been decided yet by the town in terms of when they would do it and how they will package it, but we feel that it will be in the range of $400 to $420 per household based on that $475,000 average valuation, which represents about a 6% increase to the average homeowner's tax bill. So we've been asked to explain what happens if Stoughton doesn't vote to approve the project, and obviously the state funding is available for this project. We would have to go through, Stoughton would have to go through another process to get a new project through the state funding. So that's one thing that would obviously be a consequence. These buildings, both this school and to a lesser extent the Wilkins, are obviously have significant deferred maintenance requirements, and over time, those are going to get more significant. And so obviously, that'll have to be dealt with without state reimbursement. The construction costs are escalating. They're not escalating like they were 2 years ago, but there is, generally speaking, there is no feeling, short of a major recession, that would see construction costs de-escalate. So they're escalating at basically 3 to 5%. That's the number we've carried actually in our budget for escalation until we get to a guaranteed maximum price. If we were to fully renovate these two schools, which we had to look at as part of the MSBA process, those came in roughly at about $35 million each. That doesn't change the layout or the functionality. It simply brings all the building up to code and replaces end-of-life systems. So if you do that for the two schools that we're consolidating, obviously that basically equates to the amount that the town is paying for this project for its town share to get brand new schools without living with components that are 50, 60, 70 years old. And as mentioned earlier, the district would need to restart the redistricting process and investigate a plan B, because there is an overcrowding issue that needs to be dealt with. So whether that's dealt with through modulars or some other way, we would have to learn how to deal with, the district would have to deal with that process much earlier than outside this process, outside the project.
All right, so TJ, if he was here, this is one of his big topics, but in general, for me, as not only the superintendent, but also being a resident of the community, I think this is where we have to really talk about the sense that an elementary school is a community school, and that's what's been put forward in our project here. And that's the reason why when you look at this project, it's not just an elementary school. It truly is a community elementary school to be used by students, by families, by our retirees, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that's really important as superintendent is the idea that we would have a 21st century brand new elementary building in 2027, over 25 years into the century, if you will. And that to me is really, really important, because what it does is it creates the idea of the quality of the education. If you look at the video of the layout of the inside of the building, you'll see something like STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics area for students for hands-on learning around those areas. Really, the quality of, or the idea of collaboration within students, which is a big part of any 21st century educational model. The amenities that come with this are significant. For any of you that vote at the South School, you would be going in through a separate entrance, be in a separated area with no possibility of going into the building. The building would be the only elementary school except for the Wilkins, where when you go to vote, you're completely not connected to the rest of the building. You'd have your own entrance, your own exit, and that's an issue that's come up, as you know. The community spaces that have been added with the outside courts, the pickleball, it's in what's called an under-12 soccer field. We also have a large gym for the purposes of that we currently, for example, with basketball that could be used for that. Also part of that community idea. The improved traffic pattern at this school is pretty significant. As you know, this is probably one of the most significantly not really good traffic pattern. I'll just leave it at that because you all have been here before. It's just not there. Long-term value for Stoughton. So this is, when you're the superintendent, this is always something that you can talk about, but most taxpayers never believe you. But this, at least this time, I can talk not only as a taxpayer, as a superintendent, but I can also talk as a taxpayer. To me, the value of education is what actually connects a community and allows for a community to continue to become the community it wants to be. And many of you know right now, and if you don't know, Stoughton is a community where people want to live. And I can tell you that because of our enrollment numbers. I can tell you about how the turnover in houses is right now in Stoughton. It is significant. And that is one of the reasons why we're seeing an increase in enrollment. And that's a good thing for Stoughton. We are near a lot of things. We've been a very diverse community for many years, not just recently. And then lastly, I think, and as important, is that we do want our homes to have valuation as we're living in them or retiring in them or eventually selling them. Pride in community, there's probably no one that feels more pride about Stoughton than I do, but the fact of the matter is, and I think this is important because it ties into the future growth, the plan of the school committee that's been very clearly articulated to the building committee, been articulated to me before I came in this past July, is that we do not believe that we can continuously build elementary schools over and over and over again in this town. You all know that if this is successful, we have a middle school project coming because that's the next big project. But after that, we're not looking to add or to build new elementary schools. We might have to renovate or do an addition to an elementary school, but we're not looking to go out and find another site and build another elementary school. That is the long-term plan of the school committee that is no longer school committee members and the current school committee. And to be quite honest, I think that's fiscally responsible for long-term, because you can't continue to do what we did in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. We built 5 elementary schools in Stoughton. And by the time we were building the Daw and the Gibbons, we were already renovating and adding to the other 3 buildings. So in those 16 years, we built 5 new elementary schools in Stoughton. We don't think that in today's day and age we can do that we have to actually have a better plan for the community in terms of its needs. So we've talked. Yeah, if you use the code here, you can get more information. You can go to the website as well, and feel free that if you need something, swing by my office over on 31 Pierce Street. I'm happy to get you a copy of whatever you need. The next 2 things are the town meeting and then the ballot initiative. I think we've beat that horse a couple of times tonight, and we'll now begin the concept of any questions. Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay, so you talked about after hours. I mean, I'm in a butter on Cabral Circle, and I really didn't see a good map of the area where my street was in relation to where the school's going to be. I would like to see that if possible. And if you're going to have after hours programs, is there going to be a time limit where you're going to shut it off at night?
Yeah, that's a great question. I appreciate the question. So in my history as a superintendent, I've had to deal with this issue a number of times of building new buildings and then having to be careful that we have very critical utilization of those fields, depending on a number of factors. Number one, if they're lit or not lit, right? That becomes question number one. Number two, in most cases, what we've done is established to the school committee a protocol of what that would look like. We're not looking to having these fields open until 9 or 10 o'clock at night. That's especially during the work day.
He has the map up, so where would my street be?
Is this the Brown Circle?
Okay.
I believe so, off of Sumner?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yep, that's it. So you can see
That's
there's
the
a,
sorry.
there's a good buffer that's being maintained here between, there's the development down here, is it assisted living, I think?
Yeah.
Here, there's wooded behind their property and wooded behind our property here at the town's property there. So these are the houses on Cabral Circle. There's no vehicular access, no pedestrian connection to this side of town here. And the field is here, the school is here. The access is from this side and from Park Street. Yeah, and during construction, all the, construction activities on Park Street, coming in and out this way.
And what hours of construction, what hours of the day?
Well, they would be the normal traditional hours, which in Stoughton, I believe, would start at 7 o'clock, so there'd be no noise prior to 7 o'clock, including starting trucks and backup whistles and so forth. And I think they can go till 5. The typical construction day is till 7 till 3:30. Sometimes when there are certain activities that require going late, they go late, but we need to get permission from the building department to do that.
Question here? We'll go here and then we'll go to the back.
So, presentation. Thank you so much. Looks like it's going to be a beautiful school. I am a homeowner on Haynes, and obviously the reason what brought me here was that access road. So if you could explain to me a little bit about how the gates are going to work. Who's in charge of the key? What happens if there's an emergency? How do we get that open? And then how do we make sure that it stays closed for my neighborhood that's a very quiet, small, dead-end street?
Yeah, great question. So I definitely have experience with this as part of a renovation addition in my last community. So the idea is that you're going to have police, fire, and the school department with keys, right? And typically the fire department and police department wouldn't allow for us to put a gate there if they did it. Now they could also just crash through it if they really needed to, but the idea of this is when I came on board, if you remember, back in July, we had a lot of discussions about Fano Drive, right? We were going to come across Fano Drive, and Haynes wasn't even really looked at that time. Unfortunately, the deliberations with the owners of that property we couldn't get to a resolution. So as superintendent and being involved with the National Police Association and also local and state, building a public building should always have at least a secondary exit or an emergency exit. In this particular case, we do not think that Haynes going out to that road is a regular road. It's truly for the purposes of an emergency use. So if the building needs to go from a lockdown to students onto a bus and getting out of there, that could be used. So it's not going to be used for regular drop off and pick up, any of that stuff. We'd only be accessing Park Street regularly. It would hopefully never be used by the school department in any way, shape, or form. Could be used by police, fire, and the schools for a training, as an example. We currently are working between the three departments on that, but there is no definitive access, and those are the only three people that would have, three groups that would have access.
One more question. So my kids went to this school, and living on Haynes Road, it's a literal nightmare, the traffic pattern on Park Street coming around the sharp bend just after Haynes. In fact, we challenged the state to try to get a crosswalk put across Haynes at one point for my children who were taking the bus to the middle school and high school. We were denied. It's a serious safety issue with the traffic patterns on Park. I'm just wondering about the traffic study and the light and how the traffic will get backed up and the risk for accidents at the sharp bend by the school, the store on the block. How will we know about the traffic pattern studies and what's going to happen to?
I'm going to get the experts to answer you, but I will also tell you that the other thing is we have a new fire station being built in that area, as you know, and there's some discussions about how lighting is going to take place there. But in terms of, we're dealing with a state road, so I'm going to turn it over to Carl for specifics on your question.
Well, first of all, just as we did with the building design, there'll be community meetings to talk about traffic in particular. And as we said, nothing is resolved at this point in time as to exactly the design of the intersection, the crosswalk. A couple of positive points to keep in mind is the right-of-way, Park Street, Route 27, is wide enough that there can be left turn lanes, deceleration lanes for traffic going north and south on Park Street. So that should help significantly at morning arrival time, afternoon dismissal time. We are planning that the exiting road would have 2 lanes, so there could be a stacking lane for those turning left versus those who want to turn right, again to keep traffic moving and not backing up there. Is envisioned, and of course a pedestrian crosswalk would be essential at that location right on Park Street. Whether there's one further north, is that what you're talking about at Haynes?
Yeah.
Across Park Street?
There's no crosswalk all the way on that side.
No sidewalk, you mean, on
Sorry.
Park Street? Right, yeah, we're aware of that. That's why we're saying, yeah, it's essential that there be a crosswalk here at least as part of this project. Beyond that is a little bit beyond the scope of this project in terms of putting sidewalks, north and south of Park Street. That would be another project for the town and or the state to consider there. But we certainly welcome, and the state is going to require, I think, that we have public meetings to get abutters like you and others who are familiar with the traffic patterns and the issues to come to meetings to help us design this.
Gentleman in the back.
So, traffic light or no traffic light at this point, Haines Road being a very narrow, small, quiet family neighborhood, the only way I can see the way the path is set up, is not have, to have minimal impact, would be to put a gate at the end of Haines Road Park. With putting a gate there, even with putting 2 gates, and not to mention the environmental impact that you have in there with that area, even putting a bridge, having the field, the playing field right there, would only have a large amount of people trying to avoid traffic going into the main entrance, parking all up and down an extremely narrow street to gain access to walk up, foot traffic, not to mention, and piggybacking off what she just said. Even with that, there'd be so much traffic going up because of any kind of access at the end of Haines Road. Earlier, you also mentioned that even though this part up on the screen on the upper left-hand part, nothing was going to happen at this moment, but could be there for future expansion. Will then obviously lead to those gates coming down and being used to further expand that area. Would be needed extra traffic, or road access, for the traffic going to that area. I don't see how there wouldn't be some extreme impact on that street having that there. Especially again, the foot traffic would be huge. People dropping students off to enter into that, to walk up to the school. During any kind of event or game that's being held on the field or in the school, say a play or whatever, there would be all kinds of traffic, people parking up and down the street just being active.
I don't think for the purposes of school events that there'd be people parking back there, simply because of, we do have significant amount of parking in this new school proposal. That said,
The extreme increase in amount of students that could possibly go into the school.
there'd be about 5.
On Park Street, waiting to enter in.
Right, so in my last district, what happened is the school department had to put somebody at the gate and say this is not a drop-off for anybody. The same way that I have somebody at the high school right now, not allowing people to come to the middle school parking lot to try to do a drop-off irregular. I have to put a body there. That's what we would probably have to do as a school department if it became an issue that people think that that's the new drop-off area. It wouldn't be a drop-off area because, to be quite honest, if I was superintendent, I would be saying to a child and then to the parent, this can't happen. You're not going to be allowed to come in this way.
And it wouldn't be wise for people to drop off their students there, especially in the area that's in, but you know that's what's going to happen.
And again,
It's not going to be a question.
well, we can, but when I called the Stoughton Police Department about a situation that I had at the middle school, it resolved that problem. I no longer had that one person who decided that they weren't going to follow the rules. That's the process that we have to use. No matter where we build a building, we're going to have people who are going to take advantage. I suggested the idea of having a secondary access for emergency response only. Because if you look at every national study of every major event that has happened in this country, secondary access to be able to relieve that building is significant. It's the most significant part of literally getting the students and the staff out of the building to a reunification spot, is to have a secondary access.
But you said final drive, people didn't want to do anything there, so why can't people do those the same thing?
Say that again, I'm sorry?
You said that you tried to do things on final drive?
Yeah, Faneuil Drive is a piece of property that had to try to be negotiated to be able to take over.
Right.
It's not a public road. It's a private piece of property that was asking, I'll just talk in the general, millions upon millions of dollars that would have made this project even higher, and to be quite honest, we couldn't take it back to the taxpayers that, for the purposes of a road.
Also, just to continue the gentleman's question about potential of accessing from Haines, I apologize, the projector has changed the proportions of the screen, but the reality is it's a much shorter drive to get to the school from Park Street than from Haines, and a much shorter walk. But in addition, there's significant amount of parking here for day-to-day activities, certainly not only for every teacher, but for parents dropping off, for kindergarten parents dropping off, for buses. So we don't anticipate there are going to be backups on Park Street that would in any way discourage people from coming in that way. And for special events, all of these long driveways are wide enough that they can have parallel parking along them. So it almost increases the amount of parking by 50%. And we've worked with the school principals who sort of understand the demand of parking at their school. So we do not envision cars, backing up onto Park Street. And as we mentioned, Park Street is wide enough too that it can have right turn lanes, left turn lanes, so that it allows the through traffic to go through, it allows the traffic to enter the site efficiently, so that there'll be minimal backups there. So I don't believe it'll be in any way an attraction to drop off there, but as the superintendent mentioned, there are other ways to discourage that too, if that were to happen.
Sure, but even if we had a light right outside on Park Street, the amount of traffic that goes through Park Street, I'm sure, there'll be a study on it, you haven't already done so.
A traffic study, have you done traffic study?
It's underway.
Well, obviously, if people are going to stop there, there's going to be an extreme amount of backup, eventually, there'll be a lot of students that are going to be coming and returning to school, right? Buses and people, other parents are dropping off their students. It's pretty obvious that people are going to become aware of the side street and use.
It is a dead-end street. It's not very convenient to drive through to drop off, right? In that sense too. But also, the traffic light, it could well be that it's only operational at arrival time and dismissal time. And the other times it's green all the time, or flashing green, and the traffic is uninterrupted. The normal traffic, particularly evening traffic when school is already dismissed. But there was another question here. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's a great idea for a town to get a nice elementary school. When you're building on a watershed, that's plain and simple. What's your water mitigation going to be for all these parking lots? Is the school going to be on septic, private, it's going to be on sewer? Where's all your water mitigation going to go? All that runoff is going to run into all the properties, all the streams that are in the area. The water levels are going to be rise. 65% of the people that live in that area have septic
On
systems.
Haynes Road.
There's no sewage. There's no sidewalks.
Some comes to water.
It's very-
Water is constant.
It's very low, I can't even believe you're even thinking about building where you're going.
Well, I can assure you that we have a great engineering team. We have strict reviews by the state and by the town.
I think you should look at a topographical map of the area.
We have very good survey. The school will be on sewer. There's a sewer line in Park Street right here that we're connecting to. The drainage is being considered not only because we're close to wetlands, but because of Massachusetts stormwater.
You're going to be sitting on wetlands, you're not close enough. You're going to be disturbing streams, venial pools, venial streams.
I understand.
and ponds.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I understand you're familiar with the site.
Oh, very.
We've had others out there familiar with the site to flag the wetlands too. So we do know where they are, we do know where the buffers are, and we're working away from them. The bridges are the only areas that are crossing
That's
and
gonna be all
impacting the
runoff.
wetlands.
You're just satisfying your own self. All that's going to be runoff every time it rains, every time.
And
it
we're
snows.
capturing all that runoff and putting it back into the ground, and the way the stormwater management regulations work in this state, which are not just, our own judgment, they're peer reviewed, they're
You're not
reviewed by the
gonna run-
Conservation
You're not going to
Commission.
run all that runoff into the septic systems or the sewer systems in the town.
You can attend the Conservation Commission hearings when we're not going to get a building permit without doing this, without capturing the stormwater in a way that prevents any additional
There's
runoff
gonna be
off of the
runoff-
site.
There's going to be runoff from the roads that you're going to build in Haynes Road. And that area where you plan on punching in Haynes Road is very low, and it's actually very low topographically.
Mhm.
And all the water that starts at the top of Haynes Road runs down to the bottom of Haynes Road. That's where you plan on punching in. And there's a bridge there with a stream, and that stream floods constantly. And there's houses there, several $100,000 houses that have just had to put new septic systems in. And now you're talking about increasing the water level.
We're not talking about
You're
increasing
going
the
to
water
increase the
level.
groundwater level.
We're not increasing the
You will.
runoff.
You
We're not
will.
increasing
You
the
say
rate
you
of
won't
runoff
affect it, but
or the
you-
volume of runoff.
You- You're gonna affect the runoff, you're gonna affect, with all that project and all the square footage that you're taking out, all that water's gonna go somewhere.
It does.
That's right. In the stream, in our backyards, in our septic systems. You know, I mean, I'm not against you building, but you just picked a rotten site. And it's a green space that's been enjoyed for people for 50 years, generations before us. And I think you're absolutely going to ruin it. I don't even see why you can't spend $33 million and improve this building. $33 million can go a long, long way to fixing this building. I don't want to get in an argument with him. I want you to have a new school system. But I think this site is asinine.
What's the difference?
I'm sorry you feel that way.
Lot size, this versus this lot. What's the difference in the amount of land that this school currently sits on versus that?
This is about twice as large as the existing south property, somewhere in that vicinity, but we're not using the entire site either. But again, I'm sorry you feel that way. We do have not only a team of engineers that the town has hired, that we've hired on the town's behalf, but it's going to be peer reviewed by independent engineers on, who take the very extreme view that you have, that nothing on this site should impact the abutters. And that's their charge, is to make sure that's the case. So I hope we can earn your confidence in the course of doing this design, that yes, there'll be more runoff, but the runoff will be controlled in a way that it stays on site and is infiltrated back into the ground.
I can see all that's going to run downhill, down the Haynes Road.
We'll be collecting that before it gets to Haynes Road, on site.
There's nothing there but woods and streams. That's what's always collected.
And it will be
It's an
detained.
environmental nightmare.
I'm not an engineer, but I understand it'll be detained and delayed so that when it does rain hard, it's not running off and causing increased flooding off-site. It happens over time to delay it and put it back into the ground. Yes, back there.
So I just have a couple of questions. I just want you to understand where somebody like my neighbor Alan is coming from. We as citizens have been told things ahead of any building project. All we have to do is go as far as the fire station, and we're told one thing and something else happens. So you're going to have to deal with a healthy skepticism there.
Can I address that before that?
Yeah, as long as you let me finish, but
I will absolutely let you finish, Ms. Lyons, not a problem. I think when we look at the only building that's been built in the last 50 years in town that we can support and did a brand new high school under budget, state of the art, and taxpayers are pretty happy with it.
Isn't it too small though?
Well, that's an MSBA situation, right? When you can say today you want to make this an 800 building kid and shut down 3 schools, they won't allow you to do it, right? They look at enrollment in a very different way than I do. And the fact of the matter is, you can't control up and down of enrollment. 10 years from now, you're going to be high enrollment than you are now. 15 years from now, you may be down enrollment. Ms. Lyons, your question.
So I just want to address that. You're right about the high school, but the high school services 100% of the kids in this town. This school, this site will only service a quarter of all the kids in the town.
I'm going to disagree, because it's going to allow for me to change what's happening in all of the other schools as well. So one building is new and the others aren't. But what we'll be able to do to those buildings in terms of curriculum, instruction, ELL, and special education services will completely change compared to what we're doing now, which is taking over libraries, taking over cafetoriums for classrooms. This is a classroom. This is a classroom every day. Every single day, this is a classroom. Right? The library is 2 classrooms right now.
More space.
Right? So I get the concept of the finances of 25%, but the concept of education is a new building impacts everybody else in a positive way as well.
I have a couple more things. So also the town's people across the country have feel that, but I'm going to stay feel like we have been pouring millions into education, and we don't see the level of education by any marker actually increasing. In fact, we actually see it going backwards. So that's just in terms of overall the money that citizenry keeps throwing at education in general. But my real question wants to get back to the specifics of this project here. So on Park Street, I heard you talking about a bridge, okay? I'm curious, okay, for over time with longevity, you're gonna have to involve Conservation Commission, I mean, there's gonna be a whole project. My concern is, before I spend $114 million of taxpayer money, I wanna make sure the entire project and all the consequences are fully thought through, and we have answers for. And I'm not sure we have all the pieces to this project in place at current. So with regard to the traffic, to the point of a couple of previous speakers here, we gotta keep in mind, down further on Park Street by where it intersects with Turnpike, there's gonna be another light there. They're gonna redesign that whole, that's already in the, I don't know what acronyms we're using for that, produces that new intersection, and that millions of dollars. So then, to her point, what's gonna happen here, now moving further down Park, where you're gonna have a fire station, it is a grave concern for all residents up and down parking in through all the side streets in that whole area. So with regard again to this bridge here, the fact that it needs a bridge tells me, over time it's gonna deteriorate. What is that gonna be made out of? And that Faneuil Drive, this is another question. Okay, on Faneuil Drive, I know it's gonna cost millions now, but our concern, constituents that have heard, is if that Faneuil Drive should actually be an entrance in, because we shouldn't be anywhere near Ames Road for the reasons these residents on Ames Road say. I just don't understand why we required that years ago, knowing we had that property for speed.
Yeah, I can't answer that question. That's policy that's determined by a different board than I'm responsible for. I just want to reiterate, the Haynes Drive idea is solely for emergency purposes of when we have to release that school because of an unfortunate situation. That is the only desire of the school department.
I know, but if anything happens coming in from the park, we should absolutely have a free and clear two entrance in, not just an emergency.
Well, the Faneuil Drive situation, Lisa, if I told you how much money was being asked for, you would say that I was irresponsible. You would say I was irresponsible.
No.
Because it was a cost that's nowhere close to what any professional would say the taxpayer should be paying for. So the fact is we tried and tried for months, and we just couldn't get there. And that's okay. Private citizens, they can choose to do what they want to do.
This is just what upsets all the taxpayers in Stoughton, is that they spend all this money to get this property for future school use, which is what they're trying to do now. But you can't think ahead that you need two entrances, so okay, let's pick up the Drive at the same time
Right.
and purchase it.
Those properties, but you gotta remember the taxpayers back in 1950, whatever, 60, those were provided to the district, to the town as gifts. There wasn't money exchange for those properties. And it was used for education, quote, educational purposes, is the way it's outlined. We've actually seen copies of some of the information.
Even if they're gonna hold it and do that, just for, I just don't see, and again, I know you're fantastic, I know you have your hearts in the right place. I get that, and I know everybody's doing their best out there, but there is a serious lack of forward planning in this town in general, and so when you see citizens getting upset, that is a cumulative effect. I just want you to just keep that in mind.
Okay.
Was there an offer made to the Copley Nursing Home for emergency access?
There was a discussion that took place, but that didn't go anywhere either.
But that's somewhat of a public building,
It-
it makes sense.
It's, again, different property owners have different reasons and different requests and so on and so forth. But we did talk to, it was three, including the church, as the potential before utilizing it, which would have been even more costly because of creating roads and so on and so forth. But again, reiterating difference of opinion with the gentleman talking about the topography, but the idea behind this is when you build a school, you should look at a secondary exit for the purposes of emergency. We actually looked at Fano Drive to create the concept that traffic would be coming from the Sumner area and from the park area alleviating. But that just wasn't in the works. And by the way, I actually also discussed it as part of public safety, the opportunity for police and fire to make that a road and cross that side of town easier.
So do we know what that bridge is going to be made out of in its longevity?
And just to Carl also made a comment, there's nothing that stops the town from eventually deciding to go after Fano Drive as well.
That's my other
But as the building,
cost and building more on top of.
could be a different story, it could be a different story at that time, but as a building committee, we got to a point where we couldn't do the next step. Bridge question.
Right, you may have saw I was trying to scroll through some other presentations to show you a photograph of the bridge. When we talk about bridge, it's not like a concrete highway bridge in that sense. It has, because it's crossing wetlands, it's relatively flat. The wetlands drop down and we're just going flat across in that sense. And we're trying to minimally impact the wetlands, so it just has a few piers that penetrate down into the ground to support the bridge itself. And the bridge can be a heavy timber structure, relatively low profile, not a, like I say, not a highway bridge, so that we minimize how much disruption to the wetlands below. But it will have a separated sidewalk for safe pedestrian access and a curb.
Concern over
Yeah.
time, all that traffic just one year after year after year, what it's going to do.
It has a regular roadway in a sense. It's tar like any other road, and I don't know exactly the longevity of a paved surface, but maybe in 25 years it does need to be repaved, the top coat of pavement. But it's like any other driveway in that sense.
Well, I think typically when you start hitting more wetlands and, people will want to suffer through all the repairs on 139, heading up to Randolph. That was wetlands, and I mean, how many times has that something to repair and something to repair, to the point where they have to build it up so much, I actually joked around, we have mountains built now. That's much as built. Building over wetlands, bridge, no bridge, being traveled as it's going to be, I mean, that's just a huge environmental issue. And I know engineers are going to look at it, and they're going to figure out a way to do it. Because they're all just going to do it no matter what. I don't think they're going to sit there and say, oh, we just can't do it. They'll just find a way around it, but it doesn't mean there's going to be any longevity to it.
Well, I should clarify to understand. We're spanning over the wetlands. We're not bearing on what you might think of as swampy ground. We're going through that with the pier supports that go down to solid ground, and then the bridge is the flat surface on top of that. So we're not bearing on wetlands. We're going through it onto good structural fill. I think there was
2 years of dealing with that road to be fixed, and it's an abomination to this day.
Is there a question here? Yes.
A couple of questions. One is there, and I'm assuming there's no other way to put a second road next to the one that's going in, like the ways down to go on Park Street, so you have two entrances.
This is the private property that we've been talking about that the town couldn't resolve, access.
So Park Street, or not Park Street, it's like
Oh.
by the main entrance.
This is the limit of what the town owns. The town doesn't own this, and the wetlands do continue here. So it would be a similar kind of situation, but the town doesn't own that.
figured out? That's one of the questions. Do you know that answer?
Because it's not anticipated to be operated, you know, on a daily basis, like a parking garage or something, it's meant to be locked and only in emergency, so
I know.
it's unlikely that
Well,
it'll be electronic.
Well, then if it's an emergency, they have to get it quick. They have
Sure,
to open the
sure.
gates with the key, that's gonna take a long time.
Well, an emergency may be something like a tree falls across this driveway here and cars can't leave. So then the school would, you know, make its way out to unlock this gate and then unlock that gate and let the traffic go through. That's the kind of situation that's much more probable than any other scenario.
My other concern about the case is, like you said, ATVs, motorcycles, they can go right around the gate and get out, you know, the school area. And that used to be, years ago, a lot of, places that you're going out to, there's a little bit of tar there. People have knocked down trees, so kids couldn't go in there, you know, with all their parties, because they're gonna have all this open land over here that they can go down this road, go into the woods, and have their celebrations. That's the problem. Right now, they don't go in there because there's so many trees down and brush and bushes and everything. But if it's all cleared out for pedestrians to walk in, or motorcycles, or ATVs to go around,
Sure.
that's a problem.
Well, like any school site, this one, or whatever that has, you know, a backyard or fields, it does require some supervision. We will have cameras as part of the security system on site to monitor that.
Even down by the gates too.
Perhaps.
That would be good.
So,
So I have a question. So if this is going to be access for fire trucks, school buses if necessary, et cetera, this road being an extremely narrow road, how wide is this road going to be? What's the proposal to have the width of this? Because there's no way for anything to turn around in down in that area. So they would have to take up quite a bit of area down in it.
I believe that the roadway width is 20 feet there, and there'd be, you know, adequate turning radius at the end, so
Right, so what
vehicle could get in and out.
amount of area that's being taken up in the Haynes Road?
At the frontage on Haynes Road,
Yeah, the Haynes Road, yeah.
I'm not exactly positive as to exactly how wide the Haynes Road right-of-way is. Part of the flare of the turning radius is on the, you know, the right-of-way side of the property line. Part of it's on the town side of it. It's probably in the vicinity of 40 feet wide at the maximum, where, you know, to allow, in this case, it only has to turn right coming in or turning left coming, I'm sorry, turn right going out. So, but it's 20 feet wide, basically, the whole length of the road.
There's a stream on the left-hand side of the whole road.
That's why there's a bridge. That's why there's a bridge.
Oh, no, on Haynes Road.
We're not doing any work on Haynes Road to widen it or change
I
that
understand
road.
that, the road, the emergency access road, how wide is that gonna be?
That's what we're responding to the man's
And that's
question,
what I'm
20 feet
saying.
wide.
There's not even that amount of road space there for you to build a road. There's a stream there.
Well, it is wetlands, just like there's wetlands here, and that's why there will be a bridge on top of it to
You know,
create the
you know,
roadway
you're
width.
just, you know, you're a yes man. You know,
So I think it's really important
we
that.
can build a bridge, we can build a bridge.
So we have to build a bridge thing here because it's not a legal area for them to be on. And to be quite honest, this piece of property is considered educational. So for the purposes of daily operations and so on and so forth, it is almost considered private property. When we're in session or not in session, it is controlled almost as if it was private property, unless it's provided to the community as we've discussed. So people have to use it for the right reasons, and if they don't, then they're not allowed to use it.
Well, it's public property.
The school department has the right at any time, 24 hours a day, 365, to establish what the rules are.
I mean, it seems like a huge environmental impact. And you mentioned Stoughton High, but Stoughton High was built in the same footprint that the previous was on. Wasn't much of an environmental impact around here.
I'll defer to the experts, but I do believe that we have to go through all of the processes that are required when we have any type of environmental impact. in the project.
There will be not only local review by the Planning Board and Conservation Commission, but there'll be state review too for the environmental impacts. So there are a lot of hurdles to get over before it becomes reality, and a lot of eyes, on this project to review all of those kinds of issues. And unfortunately, you're right, there aren't a lot of good sites left as Massachusetts gets more and more built up and developed. We did try, like the high school, to see if we could put a new school on this site, but unfortunately it is so restricted in terms of its configuration and access and topography, it just was not feasible in comparison with building on this site.
Any other questions? Yes?
Can you tell us when or somehow we need to find out when the meetings are regarding the conservation? Because
Sure.
with climate change, with these recent rainstorms, I think everybody who lives on Beans Roads, there's
You-
sometimes they're going overtime.
You
I
have
get
to.
ducks in my backyard. It is a high water table.
I'll
You
defer.
will be notified, I forget what the regulations are, I think it's any abutter within 300 feet of the property line will get a registered, what's it called, return receipt requested
Certified.
to notice of intent hearings with the Conservation Commission. And likewise with the state review, there's a certain requirement for notifying abutters too. So, in addition to obviously the same kind of advertising we'll do for other community meetings too.
Ms. Lyons?
So I'm just brainstorming here, and I want to know if you all did this kind of brainstorming. So to somebody's point about this property here, has anybody thought to, I know you said we would have to do modular housing or something if we were to renovate this school, but has anybody brainstormed what it would look like to temporarily house people on this property and reconfigure this property that's not ideal and make the renovations for much less money than this three-story Taj Mahal?
We did look at,
I'm just looking, has anybody looked at that idea? As an answer to house this school, why this particular school got renovated?
we did look at the issue of trying to rebuild on this site with new construction. The cost of the building would be comparable to the cost of this
I'm not
building.
saying
The
new
cost of the
building.
site development,
I'm not suggesting 21st century. I'm like making do with what we have and improving upon.
yes, we looked at that option as
I
well.
haven't seen any of those numbers. Where are all those?
They're on the building project website, which is part of the link to the school department website. You can see an addition renovation option for renovating the school, trying to salvage as much of it as we could and adding on to it in order to gain the spaces that it's
Can it go
lacking.
up? Can this building go up?
Not on top, but what was proposed was a two-story addition, so that because of the way this building steps around the site, you can actually connect the upper level to the lower level with a two-story addition across the back and create a courtyard back here. So that was the option. It proved to be close to the same expense as this, and then on top of it, there was the issue, as the superintendent mentioned, that to implement that, you do have to empty out the building at times into modulars and rent those at the cost of several $1 million, which unfortunately is not reimbursed by the state, the cost of temporary accommodations. So again, it was not seen as the same kind of value as a new project, when the costs were very close, if not more, for an addition renovation here.
I just personally think this building was overbuilt in terms of all the bells and whistles and is not being cognizant of the tax burden that's already on Stoughton residents.
So I'll try to answer a couple of things. let's wait another 10 years and see what it really does cost us. That's one. Two, if we start to renovate this building, just look around you, look down, look up, start thinking about things like asbestos, and it's all contained, but the moment you start moving it with kids in this building, as superintendent, I wouldn't leave kids in this building. That means adding modulars, not back there, not to this new site, because we'd have to spend over $5 million, $10 million just to get to the site. I'd have to move all the kids here, place modulars at the Daw and Gibbons, have to figure out septic systems for those, because you still gotta connect them, or sewer. The price goes way above the current $66 million price tag to the taxpayers. Significantly more. That's one. Two, and I think important to remember is we're getting 42 cents basically on the dollar, but that doesn't count something that we really haven't talked about that did come up at Finance Committee, which is the idea of rebates. As you know, there's significant potential for rebates in the 6 figures with this project, and then there's the potential that this project comes in lower than the projected, just like the high school did, where we saved, I believe it was about $6 million from the original proposal, and kept all the major things that we wanted to keep. And then this is the last piece. MSBA supports the idea of a new building that has a lifespan of a minimum of 50 years. We're building this for 50 plus years. I'd be 105, I'd love to be here. Ms. Lyons, you and I could go to the park together, but I know I'm not going to be, but just keep that in mind. We're building for 50 years.
I just keep saying, keep in mind the taxpayers with the middle school.
Well, I'm going
We gotta let some debt fall off.
I understand that, but at the same time, you know, we currently are building another building in town that when I was 18 years old, it should have been built, but public officials at that time said no, they wouldn't do it. The then select board, I was 18, I could vote, so I can say this, they wouldn't support a new one, and look at what we're paying for it now, compared to what the number was then.
I know, but we need you for 100 years.
Well, I would say that we came pretty close with the high school to 100 years.
Okay.
So we get it, and we appreciate you coming out tonight, especially because you are abutters. We respect your words, we really do. It makes us go back and continue to think and think and think. And we want you to make a good decision. We know you have to make a decision that's in your best interest as a family. I respect that. I have elderly parents, I get it. But at the same time, we want to make sure we give you facts and information, and if you don't like something, give you where we got it from, how we got it. Everything is on our website. And like I said earlier, if you want to call my office, 781-344-4000, or my email, j_Baeta@stoughtonschools.org. I respond to emails. You can also go to Jeffrey Pickett, who's our communications official, and we will get you specifics and details that pertains to the videos that we have, the paper trail of stuff that we have, anything, and we'll mail it directly to you. In some cases, the files are too thick, too long, so you can come out to the office and look at it and so on and so forth. And we appreciate you coming up tonight. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please tell Mike I still like him. The gentleman that left. Where is he? He's already gone. Still tell him I like him.